Right into the patterns I told you at the end of the first half. You always knew there was something special about Orion. The secret identity of Orion the Hunter. Who knew one of the first constellations you learned as a kid hold the esoteric secrets to the universe, including its origin, purpose, and future? The Tower of Babel really does provide a good foundation to answering many questions we all have about these things. Right out the gate with the info. Right after Babel, each culture tried to duplicate this Babel tech. After being spread around the world, this theme of pyramid platform temples, Orion emerged all over the world. Babel was probably the world's biggest pyramid platform. Is that the black cube of Saturn on the top level? Right after Babel and the spreading all over the world happened, you see the smaller scale Nimrod worship, pyramid building, and Orion theme aligning happening. Also the constant redefining pattern you see. Let's check out Orion and the original meanings we can dig. In OG ancient Babylonian star catalogs, it was called Sipaziana, which means shepherd of heaven, or good shepherd of God / Anu. Also interesting tie-ins about this good shepherd taking a bite in the heel, and lots of other interesting themes we're about to build on. Orion is said to be the only constellation that you can see all over the whole Earth. Orion comes from the Greek for heaven's light or heaven's boundary. Orion also has a mystery cave, a huge, mysterious, empty spot. Keep this in mind for later. Also, jumbos, which are Jupiter-sized objects that aren't attached to anything and don't rotate around anything, were also found in the nebula. So doing a quick culture hunt, it seems that Orion became a hunter, giant / mighty warrior in the Mideast and other places around the world. In Greek, he was the giant, or most high, of the heavenly boundary, which he could also walk on water with power from his father. Egypt, it was Sa, meaning father of the gods. And pharaohs were said to go to Orion when they died. In the super ancient Aram, the constellation was known as Nephilia, and the Nephilim are said to be his descendants. And in Hungarian, it's actually just called Nimrod. That's right, Nimrod. But interestingly enough, in Hebrew, it's called Kesil, which means the fool. Speaking of Nimrod, or why they call people that, putting the final CERN pieces together, which could be an attempt to break Nimrod free, or Nimrod's god Bel, or some sort of verging of the dimensions, which we've discussed. Also, CERN was built on the actual temple to Apollo, who is Nimrod. Apollo is also Apollyon, the destroyer, the beast in Revelation 9 who gets freed from the bottomless pit, and leads an army of the dead, Night of the Museum style. And you're definitely not going to believe this one, but Shiva, who's out front of CERN, in Hinduism is actually Orion, known as the cosmic dancer of destruction. This is the kind of stuff I can't even make up. This association of Shiva to Orion, Orion to Nimrod, Nimrod to Apollo, Apollo to CERN. Speaking of Apollo, wasn't that what NASA named one of their rocket missile things that they were going to send up to try to blow up the... So, yeah. Back to CERN connections. Check out this article for a long-lived dark particle search. Says they're looking for a decayed essence. Are they looking for a being that once lived, trying to reach into the ultimate ether particle candy store to build or rebuild someone or something that once existed or let them through? Wonder if it has anything to do with Nimrod. By the way, these concepts also seem to make their way into things like Marvel movies and other places. Marvel actually does have a character named Nimrod who's 9 feet and change, and besides fighting, one of his powers is teleportation, so yeah. Also think of the wording here. God splitting atom to create another being. CERN, or man as God, splitting the atom to release or create another being. Also, aside from Nimrod, you'll see that Adam, Enoch, and Noah are big deals in the ancient world and are known by many names in many cultures. Enoch and Nimrod both ruled the world if you study ancient texts, and Adam and Noah for obvious reasons. Also, interesting side note, the serpent hadn't gone through judgment yet at the time of the Garden of Eden, so it still had legs and or wings. Could this be where we get the dragon myths from? Dragon legends all over the entire world. Speaking of cultures with legends of dragons, they're also the same cultures with this Orion Nimrod tie-in. Check it out. All these cultures have the mini Tower of Babel pyramid platforms and all align their buildings to Orion. The Hopi, Giza, Teotihuacan, Nabtapla, the Black Mesa, and it goes on. Now let's check out some cultural stories similar to the Tower of Babel. In the Sumerian Assyrian Enuma Elish, Marduk built a tower / portal to be a gateway for the gods. At a temple that would be his seat of power, which the higher gods fought back against with tech that caused all sorts of natural disasters, including volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, and other destruction that definitely would result in a Pangea land split type of land splitting event. It also mentions the nations being divided up and a plea to Enki to restore their languages. Greek-Roman accounts talk about giants attempting to take the celestial kingdom by stacking mountains on top of each other, but they were repelled by Father God's lightning bolt. Kind of likened to Mount Olympus. Was the Tower of Babel Mount Olympus? Or how about Mexico and Central America, who talk about giants building a tower into the heavens, but God called on the sky spirits to take it out. They also mention the dispersing of habitants and how the tower was made of stacking artificial mountains, like the Greeks. In the Aztec, Tezcatlipoca overthrows Quetzalcoatl, who was the feathered dragon serpent, by the way, and sent a great wind to devastate the world. Also, some survivors get changed to monkeys, just like the Book of Jasher. And in Native American culture, just about every tribe has stories of giants, and also stories of coming from the Pleiades or Orion. So the statement that all this stuff is just made up, or Hebrew or other sources are just unreliable, is the actual conspiracy theory. All these cultures would have to be in on it. Also, on the aligning to Orion/heaven tip, you'll find the as above, so below principle. The mirroring concept of mirror portals. Speaking of mirrors, do you remember the whole Beetlejuice 3 times in the mirror? Some of you will remember that from when you're kids. Beetlejuice also happens to be one of the stars in Orion, and you're supposed to say his name 3 times in a mirror. Although just a stupid kid thing, seems to be a tie-in with the thought. Also, beetle is the symbol for resurrection in a lot of cultures. Full circle. So you see this aligning and pattern of building continuing up until the time of the giants with David and Goliath. And this is what you're reading about when you read the book of Joshua and all the military campaigns they're against tribes of giants. Speaking of David, this is where a messianic figure emerges. The shepherd warrior who kills Goliath by the giant sword and then holds up his head. Keep that in mind for later. Back into the Orion thread in the book of Job. It mentions the cords of Orion. Some translation mentions the bands of Orion. Can you loose the cords or loose the bands of Orion? I find that fascinating that both cords and bands also have a musical double entendre, having to do with frequency. The chord/bands of Orion's star angels have to do with frequency songs that they play. Also, these Orion cords could really be a triple entendre if Nimrod, the fool, Orion the hunter, is bound, and CERN is some sort of attempt to free him, or Babel. Can you loose the cords of Orion? Only God can. Aside from this bottomless pit release, could loosing the cords of Orion also mean unleashing the powers of heaven? Quadruple entendre. That trifold strong Proverbs cord, the 3 stars of Orion's belt. Speaking of Orion, some cultures have him with a bow. Interestingly about the bow, God's promise with the rainbow, it was not actually called a rainbow, it was called a bow. So again, you have this giant with a bow. Also, with this pattern of counterfeiting and duplicating and redefining, you'll see in Revelation the white horse rider with the bow. Other depictions of Orion show him holding a lion head with a club. How about Goliath's head and a sword? How about his belt, that shepherd's pouch with the special stones? I wonder if those are the living stones of the New Jerusalem. Also, medieval Muslim astronomers called the 6th brightest star in Orion Saf, or the giant sword, as in Goliath's sword. Whose sword did David use to cut off the head of the giant? Who are we looking at, Orion the mighty hunter, or Messiah the giant killer? Could Orion be the original messianic shepherd warrior, Davidic sky symbol/sky sigil location for heaven, who by patterned hijacking and redefining became known as Nimrod/AntiChrist, mystery Babylon religion, and also revealed the secret to possibly where we came from, the location of heaven, and could be the major clue of why all old world or ancient spiritual tech were all aligned to Orion. At minimum, all these fun thoughts are tied into a common thread that becomes very clear. This experiment started at Nimrod. At first it sounds cool tech, powerful warrior, big reputation, but in the end, the Kasil, known as a fool for his choices to challenge God. Also in this picture, it looks like a circuit board sigil in the sky above his head, having to do with the firmament. But don't worry, the firmament will not be disabled by anybody except God himself when Revelation says he will roll it back like a scroll himself. Speaking of that scroll, coming up we're going to be exploring the mystery of Ezekiel's terrible crystal. In the meantime, I'll leave you with the final thought form. Think of this pattern of 3. Orion's belt, the pyramids of Giza, and the 3 crosses. What's so special is what's in the middle. You have the Great Pyramid, you have the secret empty place, cave, and nebula, and you have Jesus. What was that place called where he died? Was it Golgotha? Does that mean place of the skull? Could that be the skull Orion is holding up? The place of the skull, the cave, the power of resurrection, the secret cave in Orion's belt, heaven, the secret cave of the Messiah maybe? Also, right across from Orion there's a scorpion poised for attack. In the middle is a man holding a snake doing a battle. It's the 13th sign of the wheel, Ophiuchus. But before the scorpion can make it to Ophiuchus to defeat him, Orion, the mighty shepherd warrior, has his back, with his sword and his victory in his hand. If that's not some tag team champions of the universe tip, I don't know what is. Whatever you're going through, keep fighting off those snakes. The mighty heavenly shepherd has your back. Contemplate these mysteries on your own time, and don't forget to put on that Orion belt of truth. See you next time. Let's see how perceptive you are. When I mentioned that pattern of 3 with the good one being in the middle, did you tie it into my video about Enoch giving the wind portals and how the middle gate on all 4 sides, north, south, east, and west, the middle gate follows the same pattern. Always pay attention to patterns. They oftentimes contain the highest layer of truth. Also, I approach a lot of this thought experiment style, which is free thinking to produce a ballpark understanding. I'm not focused so much on every single detail being exactly correct, although I do believe all of it is definitely in the right ballpark. Now moving into the most fascinating mystery, how all of this you just saw, including the stars which we just mentioned, has to do with the Mazzaroth being a reflection of Hyperborea, and what all that has to do with Amanita mushrooms, Jesus, and even briefly Santa. How this story of the ages gets retold in many different ways over time, and how the layer of the wool has been pulled over many people's eyes by the fallen angels. I'm going to shatter all the deceptions and dismantle it. You're going to undeniably see the truth about everything. Also, there's a really interesting surprise in the video. See if any of you catch it. See you at the end for a wrap-up.
They say he lives up here in a big cave.
4 o'clock, wallow in self-pity. 4:30, stare into the abyss.
Yeah, doomed to my cocoon, emerge from the chrysalis. Fly to the mount of the most high, flip the script. Grit hard glue now, coming down the cliff with gifts. Hoping that you get your faith back, that's my Christmas wish.
Did you know Hyperborea was the Mazzaroth wheel? Amanita mushrooms apparently have a connection with Santa and Jesus. Plus the sacred secretion oil and the magical Anunnaki genetic tree of Nimrod all connect into one mystery. If you like rabbit trails that produce more rabbit trails or mysterious encoded patterns, stick around. As you can see, Hyperborea is the Mazzaroth wheel, which we'll be getting into more soon. But it's on that as above, so below tip, so let's dig into the North Pole. Plenty of mysteries from hidden land to inner earth openings to Mount Meru. Check out the legends of heaven being associated with the North. Amongst many archetypal parallels, let's look at 2 Bible verses. So as you can see in this verse that Mount Zion, the city of God, is in the far north, and you see here in Satan's plan to ascend to the throne, you see it's on the far side of the north. So this connection with God in the north. Also relating to legends of the North Pole and why the legend of Santa exists at the North Pole. Let's check it out. The North Pole heaven is populated by elves, angels. Santa God arrival is ushered in by elves and trumpets being greeted by a multitude of singing praises to him. Santa Claus is coming to town, or the angels worshiping him. He sits on a sleigh throne and is accompanied by reindeer or cherubim and seraphim. He comes like a thief in the night, hands out presents, salvation, or damnation, coal, according to his list, the book of life or death. Also, there's no time in the North Pole. The hour of Santa or Jesus' coming is a mystery. Jesus is a carpenter and Santa is a toy carpenter. Both are omniscient, omnipresent, and everywhere and have an extended lifespan or eternal. Outside of time, knowing if we've been naughty or nice. And little children are encouraged to come to the throne of Santa, just like we're encouraged to come to the throne of God to ask for our needs. And both have the title Father. And you'll see how both Santa and Jesus have a tie-in with Amanita mushrooms, and how some people think that's where they both came from, not probably knowing that they're related to each other. While this video is not about Santa or Christmas, you'll see them come up, and it's tied into interesting things. You'll also see this constant theme of original meaning and a hijacked meaning. The original Santa briefly was based off of Saint Nick, and has now been twisted to an occultic celebration. And even Nick is slang for the devil. And interestingly enough, Klaus ties into the sacred secretion oil, which you'll see right here, right now, in this picture. Funny how this is called Klaus, and this entire sacred secretion oil said to explain away Jesus with the 33 vertebrae, sacred oil that runs up the spine. Jesus is all just a metaphor for this. Which moves us right into astrotheology. Because apparently, all other schools of thought say that Jesus is just a ripoff of sun god worship based off of the Mazzaroth, which is the whole story in the stars put from the beginning in creation that was preemptively hijacked and manifested through various sun god attempts. But only one could ever solve, duplicate, and fulfill all the requirements for this code and be the Messiah. The true anointed champion of all, who was destined from the beginning. Anyway, with astrotheology, the whole thought is that on the winter solstice, on December 22nd, the sun goes down and reaches its lowest point and dies on the southern cross of the sky. It stays at this lowest degree for 3 days before it's reborn and resurrected and then starts to rise again. This creation reflecting the creator story that was all in the stars from the beginning is the idea. However, it's been attempted to be usurped from the angels that knew it since the beginning. And since it's all in the stars first, and the ancestors of Cain were the city builders, and now we're all in the cities where light pollution reigns and we can't see the original story in the stars to begin with, well. Also, I wonder if the sacred alchemy people and the astrotheology people have ever gotten together and wonder why the stars and the human body are all created to reflect the exact story of Jesus. What a coincidence. And speaking of sacred secretion and the tree of life, the spine, we're going to talk about the tree for a minute. It was all lost on the tree. We see the tree hijack with this Anunnaki magical tree of Nimrod, the genetic tree that connects to the other tree of life where they're doing all this manipulation. You see this weird Nimrod and Santa connection even when you're not looking for it. And even connections how Nimrod Babel is tied into rituals and sporting events we do regularly. But this tree pattern will tie into some other trees. Remember that for later. Also, on a side note, there's this whole idea of a hijack of holidays. During certain times of the Mazzaroth wheel, there are portals and openings in the sky. Sacred energy can be harvested, and they were meant to be original 7 feasts of God, yet you'll see that these have all been usurped and remixed to pagan holiday celebration that kind of all tie into Nimrod Baal worship, so that our sacred energy can be harvested during these portal openings. By the way, each of these holidays ties into one of the 7 deadly sins, like Thanksgiving and gluttony, or Christmas and greed, or Valentine's Day and lust, etc. What are you really letting in with these portals and these emotions? Also, on boss level theories, you'll see how this was originally Saturnalia and fertility, god, Nimrod, Baal worship. So Christ got thrown in there too with the sun god remixes. Just another god looped in with the winter solstice sun worship. Interesting how God's feasts were stolen and replaced, with pagan worshipping holidays all tied to a deadly sin, kind of like Disney princesses each being tied to a different disorder. Also, with the sun dying on the Southern Cross, you'll see that this is the final version of Jesus a lot of the elite want to have, which you'll see with the Jesus still on the crucifix, dead, as their final picture, not the resurrection as the final picture. Which brings us as we reach close into the Jesus psyop, the biggest conspiracy in the Matrix. Reptilian cover-up of Jesus. What do most people think about modern church? How about recorded versions of Catholic Church history? Or hypocrites? Exactly, that's my point. None of that is Jesus, that's all man. These are all systems of corrupt men, which you should be opposed to because ironically, Jesus was opposed to them as well. Jesus did not condone any of that, he stood against the leaders. He stood against the system. He preached against the hypocrisy and leaders of the system. And who did he chill with? He chilled with sinners and the regular common man. What did he teach? He taught love, peace, forgiveness, joy, mercy. He taught rediscovering who we were made to be as God's ambassador of the God. An ambassador from a superior civilization, meant to do more than what we're doing down here. He taught holy living where we wouldn't hurt each other. But that's not what you think when you hear the name Jesus. Because the groupthink of the Matrix hates him, and you think what the psyop wants you to think when you hear Christian. Even the celebs in the industry are on the complete opposite SRA tip. That should show you everything right there. Of course the church has been infiltrated. Aside from the Bible saying it would happen, it'd be stupid for it not to be. If you were a wise genius like the devil, it'd be stupid for him not to use powerful things like the Word of God or systems like the Church of Men to manipulate people. Obviously it's happened, but that doesn't take away from the real, or the reason there's a psyop, or all of these patterns and connections. Think about it. If you look around and use your brain, you really shouldn't need all of the historical accounts, including non-Christian, Jewish, and Gentile accounts, as well as Chinese astrologers, Shangdi, and other interesting stuff we'll be getting in. Plus, in Japan, the symbol for 10 is a cross. It means heaven, and it's pronounced Jew. So people that are newer into their journey often say that stuff like Jesus is a copy. They just haven't looked hard enough. Or things like a Bible are just cherry-picked from other cultures. They just haven't looked into this and seen that either all cultures must be in on it, or it's the most genius cherry-picking of a congruent supernatural document that exceeds mathematical chance, or... And it's also not wrote in a way to convince anybody that it's real. It constantly criticizes its own people, their decisions, their leaders, exposes the sin of their leaders, and even a lot of weird things about God. Think about that. Your own conclusion is obviously always up to you. I hope I've given you some interesting things to consider. They have tried to explain away Jesus with astrotheology, sacred secretion, mushrooms, Santa Claus, Nimrod sun worship ripoffs, and the list goes on and on. Now you've got to ask yourself why. Tying it all back together, what was all lost on the tree was gained back on the tree of the cross, and will bring us back to the tree of life in the end. And lots of things we see, including the Christmas tree, are a reminder of this whole story. And other things like the sun too. And the sun being reborn on the 25th is surely the reason for the phrase Christmas miracle. Speaking of Christmas miracle, I hope you get yours. See you next time. With ancient Babel and Nimrod as a starting point, you can now take the ancient Docu-Comp and follow these references throughout history, especially the Apollo video. And that would directly sequel into the Quantum Spirit Realm Master Plan video. All connected from Babel to the future Babel, CERN. And even the Goodbye to the Sun comp is related, tying into Apollo. Well, nothing more to say there. I'll just let you marinate with your own thoughts. And even to add on to that, the whole spirit realm, I think an angel might have been in that video you just saw. If you watch it again, go back to where I start talking about the sacred alchemy. And for the next minute, where I'm comparing sacred alchemy to the Mazzaroth You will see constant flashes. You'll even see what I think is an angel running behind and in front of me at super fast speeds. I remember that night there was anomalies in the room like lightning that kept happening inside of the room. And then somebody caught on to it. Check out this comment and my response. Either way, if you go back and check for it or not, hopefully it just adds on to the understanding of the story of all ages. The spirit realm is real. God is there, and He wants you to participate and partake in the tree of life. Follow the red letters to the New Jerusalem. See you at the tree of life.
The mood is right, spirits up, we the night, and that's enough.